So one of the most important concepts that the book tries to get across to you is the fact that decision making is a process. It is not something, simple guessing is not what decision making is, okay? And I'm going to talk about SWOT analysis in another video, but for today, I want to talk about the things that are parts of decision making, and most of what I'm going to talk about here comes from a guy by the name of Herbert Simon, okay? And Herbert Simon says that part of the problems that we have in making decisions is that we have bounded rationality. Bounded rationality, the word boundary simply means something that limits you. So here in Al-Ain, there's a boundary between here and Bahraini. And so that border is a boundary. You can't go through it without easily, okay? So bounded rationality is the idea that as a human, there's only so much information that we can handle. Our brain has limits. So there's only so much information you can take at one time. Herbert Simon also gave us this idea, which is called satisficing, which is one of my favorite words in all of management, in the study of management. And this is saying, how many times in life do we not need a perfect answer? In other words, very often in life, we don't need to know what the absolute best answer is. We need to know just give me a good answer. Give me an easy, I don't need to think about. When you think about the last time you went to eat, did you spend a half an hour mapping out all of your options? No, I'm sure you didn't. If you had very little money, you probably ended up at Rationality. And if you had a lot of money, you probably were eating steak or something much nicer, okay? So satisficing says, for most decisions you're not going to take an hour to decide something. And so I like that term, satisficing. So, moving on to Herbert Simon's decision-making model. He believed there are 8 steps in the decision. To make a good decision, there's 8 steps in making that decision. The first is what's called a situation analysis. And this is where you're literally just getting the facts. Explain what is going on, okay? So just tell me what's going on, situation analysis. Step 2, define the problem. Now this may sound easy, but it's not. How you define the problem, how the problem is framed, how the problem is explained will ultimately affect the solution, okay? And when I do the example of SAFE that I'm going to do in another video, you'll understand why this is so important. Step 3 is what's called the critical success factors. These are the things, the elements, the whatever you want to call it, the parts of the solution that any good, viable solution must have these elements, okay? And in these, in the business world, actually I think in anyone's world, time and money are always critical success factors. If you come up with a solution that's going to take 5 years to implement, it's probably not a good solution. If you come up with a solution that's going to cost 1 million dirhams, it's probably not a good solution. So critical success factors are simply stating it has to meet these minimum requirements or we can't even consider the solution, okay? So critical success factors. Step 3 is generate alternatives. Come up with as many alternatives, as many possibilities as possible. And this is where you have to encourage people to be creative, to brainstorm. Because sometimes some of the craziest ideas out there might just be the one that is the best. Step 4, analyze each alternative. Explain what is good and bad about each alternative. It is important on this step to be fair. You should not make any idea look bad even if you don't like it. And here's why this is important. If you say this alternative is bad because, this alternative is bad because, and this alternative is great, well then you might as well just tell me the alternative you've chosen, okay? Almost every alternative in life, every option you face in life has some good points and some bad points. And so here it's important that you show the good points and bad points. Step 5, choose which alternatives you want to implement. So the alternative, you can choose more than one. If there's a combination of alternatives that you want to use, then a combination's fine. Step 6, implementation. Now, this is another one that people think is an easy one to do, but it's not. How often in life do you implement, how often in life have you heard of a great idea on paper, but in reality it just didn't work? Okay? So, step 6 is explaining how you're going to implement it. How are you going to actually carry out whatever plan you come up with? Step 7. Step 7 is, how do we know the problem is solved? Sometimes something may look like, oh, we've got a solution here, but how do we know for certain that the problem has been solved? Okay, and again, when I give the safe example, this will make a lot more sense. And that leads me to the 8th and final step, which is feedback. Feedback is always the last step in a process. Feedback answers the question, how do we know we've achieved our goal? What can we do better? Okay, so if you, step 7 had how can we know we achieved our goal, but feedback here is what in the process can we do, what have we learned from this? Okay, so feedback, the 8 steps. Now, another concept that came from Herbert Simon that I really love is the idea of what's called escalating commitment. The word escalating simply means something that increases, okay? And if you go to the mall, the thing you ride from one level up to the next level, they call that an escalator, okay? So the word escalating simply means increasing. And his point with this is that when you escalate your commitment, it then becomes hard to quit. Think about that. The longer you do something, the more you commit to doing something, the harder it is to quit it. Escalating commitment. Oh, by the way, when I was teaching this in the US, I would ask my classes, how many of you have been in a relationship that you knew the person you were in a relationship with was not going to be the person you were going to marry? But it's hard to break up with the person because you've spent money together, you spent time together, and you've maybe met his or her parents, and so after doing all that, you have trouble quitting the relationship. And when I say this, when I ask this in my American classes, it's hilarious because like almost everyone in the class very timidly raises their hand. Everyone's done it. And so this is escalating commitment. Even when you know it is the right thing to quit, sometimes it's hard to quit. And yeah, even when you know it's the right thing. So group decision making, I just want to get this point across to you that groups overall make better decisions than individuals. Groups have more ideas, so they usually make a better decision. If you have a group decision making, people will buy into whatever the final decision is. The negatives to group decision making are that it takes more time and there's obviously a chance of conflict. Okay? So groups make better decisions, but it can be difficult. And groupthink. So I love, see I love all these terms. Groupthink. Groupthink is the idea that there's no reason to argue. Let's just agree. Arguing is only going to take up time, and so what's the point in arguing? Where I learned groupthink as a child was when in our family we would often go out to eat on a Friday night, okay? And we'd go to a restaurant for dinner. And Mom would always ask, so where do you want to go eat today? And I, as a young child, I would be like, oh, let's go for pizza. Oh, let's go for whatever. Mom didn't like pizza. That's important to the story. So I learned at a pretty young age that Mom was only asking to be nice. In the end, we were going to go where Mom wanted to go. And so Mom wasn't asking because she really cared where Steve wanted to go eat. She was asking because Yeah, she was just asking to be nice. That's it. And so I learned at a pretty young age that when mom said, "Where do you want to go eat?" I would be like, "Anywhere you want to go, mom. I'm sure it's a great idea." And devil's advocate. This is the term devil's advocate is a phrase that you need to know if you're you need to know this phrase. And most often in life, if you know the meaning of each word in a sentence, then you know what the sentence means, okay? This is one of those times where it's not true, okay? So the word devil means the same thing as, I think in Arabic you call it shaitan, anyhow, the evil one, the one representing evil. And to be an advocate for something means you're speaking for it. So if you put those two together, it means you're speaking for the devil, which is not the case here. That's not what devil's advocate is about. Devil's advocate is the idea that you point out everything bad about an idea with the goal of making it better. Okay? So it's not, devil's advocate is not being mean. I'm trying my best to help you here, and that's what a good devil's advocate will do. I'm trying to point out what's bad in the hopes of making it better. And last but not least for this decision making, what you need to know is the word brainstorming. Brainstorming is simply coming up with as many ideas as possible, and it's important in brainstorming not to judge. It's important in brainstorming to encourage creativity. It's the comment I made back above in generating alternatives. I said that back in generating alternatives, I made the comment that you want to encourage people to be as creative as possible, because sometimes those creative solutions are the ones that are absolutely the best. So that's it. That's really all you need to know for decision making. I'm going to make one more video on decision making showing an example with a real life example actually of a friend of mine named Safe. So that's it for now.